Hi. First, I wanted to address the person who made a bunch of comments on my live chat, which I found much, much later, about why I don't interact with people and what is the point of going live. So, this must have been someone that was new to my channel because going live is my only option without having a tech savvy person in my life to download or upload videos for me. So I cannot converse with the live chat. In fact, I can't even see the live chat. Sometimes the live chat shows up for a couple seconds and then it usually soon thereafter disappears. So sometimes I'll see the names of people who are here, but most of the time I don't see it. In fact, the only reason I'm mentioning this is because yesterday, when I went back to my computer, my actual computer, not my phone, because I'm still recording on my phone at the moment, that's when I actually saw the live chat that this person had sent 5 or 6 messages. So don't think that I mean to be impersonal or rude or anything. It's just that I don't have enough subscribers at this moment to technically go live on a public platform. Therefore, it just keeps working on whether I can actually see your comments or not. So I apologize if that's an issue for you guys. It's super hot once again, so I'm going to try this time in my best effort to make a shorter video. Super hot, hence the no makeup. And anyway, July is really hot in a whole other kind of manner. And I'm not speaking about my apartment. The electromagnetic energy and the electromagnetic frequency and the spectrum of colors and the spectrum of energy on the planetary overall is unlike anything we have ever experienced, or at least in this particular solar cycle, for a really long time. I don't believe that they, and when I say they, I mean science, is actually aware of what's going on. I think there are people in the know who do have access to ancient texts that are aware of what's going on in this cycle right now, but they are not sharing that with us. And the reason they're not sharing that with us is because the fear that resides in them. In talking about it, the first thing is within this solar cycle, we recognize the power to shine from within and alter our personal reality, and along with that, our outer reality. That's not something they want us to know. The other thing is there's a lot of fear on their end that if they told us exactly what this particular solar cycle and this particular time right now, if they explained to us what that was about, they fear that humanity would then say, okay, well, if they talked about it, it would be in almost apocalyptic way they would speak about it, right? So people would then decide that whatever they truly want in their heart space is more important than anything going on in the outside world. That's the other reason they don't talk about it. So if you spend much time in nature like me, you might be noticing some really unusual changes that are going on at this time. I spend a lot of time outside, no matter what season it is, and here are some of the things that I'm noticing. I've lived in the area where I am right now in Cincinnati on and off over the course of the last 20 something years for 11 years. So that's longer in this part of Cincinnati than I've spent in any part of Cincinnati other than the place in Ohio where I grew up. And so I'm noticing some amazing, amazing changes right now. One of the things that I'm noticing is it would appear initially that we have different flora and fauna than we've had here for the first 51 years that I have spent living here. But what I have come to notice after taking pictures and taking notes about these things is that the flora and fauna is not any different than it ever was, but it is reacting now to the solar cycle in a way that it's not ever reacted. So I have walked a 10-mile radius around every place in Cincinnati or every place on the planet that I've ever lived. In the 11 years that I've been walking around Northside, where I currently live, there have never been any yellow flowering trees in Cincinnati, ever. And these are streets that I've walked down hundreds, if not thousands of times. So a couple of weeks ago, I saw this amazing tree that almost looked, when it started blooming, like an Insidian orchid. Well, Ohio is very far from a tropical place to live. And like I said, we've never had yellow blooming trees here. Bushes, flowers, yes. Trees, no, never. And this year there are 2 trees that are flowering and blooming yellow that I have never seen in my entire life. So the first one I took multiple pictures of and took it to my parents, who are both 77 years old and have lived here their entire lives. Neither one of them knew what this tree was. So then I took it to one of my other friends that has lived in the tri-state area, been between Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana for the last 70 years. He also did not recognize the tree. So I went on to an app where you can break down the different characteristics of the tree. And what I got left with were 3 options, which were all in the ash tree family. So then I finally figured out, after a couple of days of searching, that this is not a tree that's new to Ohio, but the fact that it is blooming these gigantic, amazing, wonderful smelling blossoms. And the smell of it is what kind of pulled me into it. So we have a tree that in the 51 years I've lived here in Ohio has never bloomed, and now it's blooming like something very tropical and exotic. There was a second tree that I actually smelled before I saw that had yellow flowers dangling from it. So 2 yellow trees that I've never seen bloom. I have yet to figure out what that second one is. The light on this planet has been changing for so long, and in July I do expect an influx of light that we've never seen before. And while I understand and know and recognize that everybody here is really looking for some kind of astronomical change as far as solar events, when looking for those astronomical changes, we have to really look at what's going on and what's leading up to the other changes that we're looking for, right? That would be like waiting for the cake to come out of the oven when you haven't mixed the ingredients. So let's not get super ahead of ourselves here. So there's all kinds of flora and fauna that are reacting to this light in a way that they have never reacted before. There's some kind of molecular change as well in the plasmatic light that is now hitting the planet that is causing things to bloom that have never bloomed. So those of you that don't know me on a personal level, I worked in the flower shop and landscaping industry for 28 years. And there's a really super popular ground cover here that I've never seen bloom, and I have planted in my yard, and I also planted in containers outside. And that is also now producing yellow blooms. Again, not something I've ever seen. So things have been very gradually for many, many years, speeding up the process of how they are evolving, how they are changing like we are. And we feel the changes, but we only need to look around in our outside world to see that changes are happening on a really accelerated pace at the moment. These 2 yellow trees were the most beautiful trees I've ever seen in my life. And I can tell you, I would have surely known if I had seen one bloom before. So trees and ground covers are producing flowers or flora that has not happened in the 51 years that I've lived here. That's a really big change. I'm also noticing a super big change in the birds as well. I was actually and have been feeding the goldfinches or yellow finches since I moved in here the year before last on 11/11, and they only eat a certain kind of thistle seed, so that's what I was buying them. They have a super small beak, so it's like the only thing like that you can feed them if you want to feed them through a bird feeder. Otherwise, they kind of just graze off the local fauna and seed pods of things that are blooming around here. But the goldfinches have been gone for a year and a half. I've not seen a single goldfinch. And yesterday was the first day that I've seen a goldfinch in a really long time. Now, I looked up initially to see why they had disappeared a year and a half ago, and as it turns out, according to the internet, they all migrate to Michigan in the spring for mating season. So that made sense to me, but the fact that they never came back didn't make sense. So I'm really watching and listening and paying attention and taking notes and taking pictures about what's going on around me with the flora and the fauna and the animals as well. So my dad has a pond with many frogs in it, and he's had that pond for I think 20 years. And so he has some local frogs that have kind of moved in there and taken their rightful ownership of said pond. Normally, when you open the kitchen door to come outside, you can immediately hear them jumping in the pond because they do not want to have any human interaction whatsoever. However, this year, they're not doing that anymore. So when we sit outside, even today, we were having a picnic outside. The frogs are just sitting there interacting in their own atmosphere like we are not there or we are not a danger to them. The other change that I noticed today sitting outside as well as the hummingbirds, even when they stop to eat, they are in continual flight. They are in like a continual motion. That's how they keep themselves up and to be able to take nectar from flowers. I've never seen this in my life until the last couple of days, and this is the third time that I've seen hummingbird actually balancing on a bird feeder or a tree branch or whatever they're taking nectar off of. Again, of all the decades I've watched the hummingbirds, they're in continual motion or in continual flight when they are taking nectar from the flowers. They are never balanced on trees or bird feeders. So that was just amazing. And today when it happened, they were taking nectar from a butterfly bush that was 3 feet from the table while we were eating, and it didn't bother them at all. Nothing that we did seemed to bother them. So where are we with this? And maybe people don't care or they're not quite as interested in what's going on with the trees or the flowers or the animals. Maybe you're not quite as interested in that as I am. But I know everybody's looking in an outward way for these miraculous changes to be happening. And there's so many miraculous changes happening just within the past couple weeks with the animals and the plants and basically with sentient life in general. There is a tree that I go by, and it's not in my yard, it's in someone else's yard. It's an apartment building, but never you mind. No one opens their shades or their blinds, so I always figure that no one's going to see me. I will go by about once a week and I will take branches off of this pine tree to make pine needle tea because it's medicinal for 1,000 reasons. It's also something that's super expensive to buy and kind of in demand because a lot of people were using it for the side effects from the vaccination. So I used to just pick a branch off this tree every week. But the last time I went out to walk a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking I need to go get some pine off of this tree. And I always just take a small little piece of the tree and I always ask the tree to share its needles and thank the tree for the healing properties that it offers to my body. And so when I was going to pick the tree, and it's the last block before my home, so I wait till the end of the trek to pick it. When I went there to pick pine off the pine tree this time for tea, the branch, there was a branch the size that I always take already laying on the ground, so I didn't need to pick it. So the next day I thought, I could really use some more and I can dry it and store it for myself. So when I went back, there was another 2 branches laying on the ground. I am very interactive with trees. I've always been very interactive with trees. So just the thought of me needing this, the tree gave it before I even got to it. Now, I will tell you that every time I go by this tree, I put my arms up and I hold on to the branches and I tell the tree that it's my favorite, most beautiful tree on the entire street, how much I love it, how much I appreciate it. So I thought it was very interesting that it was offering and just putting it on the ground for me before I walked by. And even if these very small, what seem like maybe minute things to you are not that interesting, it's a very clear indication of the ever-changing, ever-present energy that's coming from the sun. This solar cycle is changing things on an energetic level. It's changing everything on a plasmatic level. It's changing everything on a cellular level. And that's why I believe we have trees and different kinds of ground cover flowering for the first time. And I don't even know how long because I wasn't able to find any of that information. The other thing that is a puzzle to science is what is going on with the earthquakes that are deeper than any earthquakes they've ever recorded. Now, this is not something I follow on a regular basis, but there is a channel called Dutchanese. When there is anything really powerful going on, he will give like an update of what's going on. So I've watched a couple of his videos in the last year. Now, science is telling us that they don't understand the changes and why we're having such deep earthquakes, but it's the exact same reason that we're having changes in the animals, the flora, the fauna, and all of sentient life on this planet right now. So I've mentioned before in the last several years that I said this, and then I think science, maybe a couple months later, somebody I had mentioned that they had actually proven this. It was shortly thereafter, and Ancient Aliens talked about it as well. I saw that a couple years after writing a piece that I did about photonic energy coming up from the planet and out of the core of the Earth. So we have a couple things going on, and there's a couple reasons why it's not being talked about. As far as science or quantum physics, or any branch that is related to our government and not an independent person, there's 2 things going on. The first is the people may be perhaps at the top of the echelon. You're talking secret societies. I would guess that at the top of the Vatican, they are also aware of certain cyclical things, because I believe full well that they have ancient texts which tell them everything about this cycle that we're in right now, and they're just not sharing those things with us. So that's the first part of it. But that is the top, the absolute top of the food chain, if you will. So those people are aware of it, but not sharing it. Mostly because they don't want us to look at the things that are beautiful and the transformation that's happening and the illumination that's happening on a wide scale on this planet. They want us to turn outward into the chaos, into the media, into those kinds of things. So science is not discussing what's going on, and science below the upper echelon is not discussing what's going on because they themselves do not understand it. They do not have the ancient text or the ancient wisdom that some sects of this planet have. So they're completely unaware. And when they are unaware of something, they always kind of come at it from the same angle, right? So when they speak of things that they don't know about. They seem to focus on gloom and doom. And that's not only because of the state they wish to keep us in, but that's mostly because their preference is to blame everything on global warming. And the reason they blame everything on global warming is they can then ask for donations and get huge foundations to try to support research to help well, they're not doing anything for global warming as far as I know. When I look at it, they're doing a big fat nothing. But again, they focus on the global warming because one, it's a scare tactic that keeps people in fear, but the other thing is it is a way for them to generate revenue at a time when it's become incredibly difficult for them to generate revenue. And so those two factions don't even really know what's going on. I would even say that the majority of people in the top scientists don't know what's going on. I'm sure that, like me, they're taking pictures and making notes of all these changes. But they are then either not allowed to present them, or if they do present them, are only allowed to present them in a certain way, and that is the global warming. Help us fund the cause to stop global warming, because it's the bad humans that are at fault for this, which there are definitely things that we need to be responsible for as individuals. But even so, anything that's going on planetary wide as far as pollution or other things like that are caused in the majority by big business, big agri, big pharma, and big manufacturing plants. Are not things that are, the majority of it in general is not coming from human consumption or human behavior. There are some exceptions to that, but the majority of what's going on to the negative would be them. Now, I know there's a lot of people in the alternative or even spiritual community that think the global warming is a real and dangerous thing. And David Wilcock talks about this, and I apologize, I don't remember. It's not his information, it's somebody else's information. If there's anyone out there watching that knows, I would love it if you stick that in the comments. But so within that, there is a person that's been studying this for a really long time. In this solar cycle that changes our energy, that changes the plasma, that changes everything on a cellular level in this cyclical time right now, it is causing all the planets to be brighter, to be larger, and to be warmer. And so there is a person specifically that studies the cycle. And so from the Earth standpoint, when they talk about global warming, they're only looking at planet Earth. They're not looking at all the other bodies and all the other planets and what's going on, again, because, you know, they're not going to go to Venus, I suppose, and ask for donations. So that's what that's about. But this energy is changing things to a degree that is astronomical. And if you are not seeing it, I suggest spending more time in nature. I've been noticing a lot of gradual changes over the last 3 years, but the majority of those changes that I'm really noticing have just been in the last about 8 or 9 weeks. So go outside and really pay attention, really look around and see what's going on, because it's absolutely incredible. It's amazing what's going on. And to me, watching nature is fascinating. Human behavior has a tendency to be repetitive, while nature is not so repetitive. Nature will change and adjust depending on what the energy is and how things are changing around it. It's something that it does naturally. And as human beings, we struggle, so we don't acclimate to that energy quite as naturally. So definitely get outside and notice those changes. They're absolutely amazing. I want to try to make this a short video. I've not been doing a good job at that lately. The other thing I want to talk about is I'm really not on social media very often at all. And when I am, I'm not looking for articles or videos or opinions on things that I myself speak about. And the reason for that is I want to, at this time, keep my information organic as it comes to me. Somebody asked me why I thought so many people were turning away from the spiritual community and back to organized religion. Now, since I spend so little time looking at things outside of myself and outside of nature, I had no idea that this was going on. When she asked me that, it stirred a lot inside me, and here's what I see. Within the spiritual community, like everything else, even if you go back to religion thousands of years ago, originally it was in its pure organic state of being there to give us wisdom and things to help us understand ourselves, the world we live in, and our surroundings. At some point, that changed very drastically. And then there was a sect of people who wanted to be more in the energy of what they felt in their heart space and in nature. And that really stirred up and spun off the spiritual community in 100 different ways. But when the spiritual community became very large and very booming and very lucrative, right? All the things that people were interested in, holistic medicine, crystals, herbs, gardening, all these things became, in our eyes, a way to live magically within nature and cure ourselves and be one with our surroundings. But to them, it became lucrative. So just like religion and just like every other sect of our holographic reality, they decided at some point to infiltrate the spiritual community as well. Along with the earthly influence to infiltrate the spiritual community, we also have interdimensional beings and galactic beings or extraterrestrial beings as well that were infiltrating the system, giving channeled messages, all of that. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is this. So if you started off in the spiritual community, maybe reading stuff or studying stuff or listening to stuff many decades ago or even 5 years ago, there are some pretty concrete things that you could put your finger on, that you could say, okay, well, here's some things that I've personally experienced, and here's some things that the spiritual community is also showing me. Therefore, I kind of have a little bit of grasp. Now, everyone has kind of started taking off in their own direction of listening to their heart and becoming more in tune with their surroundings, which caused those real consciousness expansion in the spiritual community at the exact same time that the spiritual community was being hijacked, partially for profit, but mostly just to confuse people. So to answer the question that I was asked, why are so many people leaving the spiritual community? Well, if you are someone that just started having an awakening within the last couple years, you can't even imagine right now going on the internet and trying to look up some simple things that maybe you and I knew decades ago, or even certainly just years ago. So that basic knowledge, one, is not really out there anymore. Two, if it is, it's hard to find. There is so much conflicting energy in the spiritual community, and there's so much conflicting information that people no longer felt like the spiritual community was a safety net. It was no longer a safety net. It was no longer a retreat from the mundane everyday life that we experience here. It just got infiltrated to the point that everything that you could find 5 contradictions to that same thing. So there's so much chaos in the world, reflecting our inner chaos as we try to maneuver through this cycle, this end of this 26,000 year cycle, in the most graceful way that we possibly can. And some of us are fine with the unknown, but not everybody's comfortable in delving or taking the deep dive into the unknown of what's going on a planet. So the reason that so many people planet-wide have gone back to organized religion is because it feels safe to them. It feels like a safety net to them. So if you go to the Catholic Church, for example, you have one book that tells you everything that you need to know. There are a set of cause and effects, or a set of rules, or whatever that certain thing is that they want you to follow. So people who went to the spiritual community for respite were no longer finding respite in that spiritual community, looked so chaotic to them. The only way they could give themselves structure in a spiritual way was to turn back to organized religion, where things are much more in black and white, and they could just go there and sit peacefully in church and not have the arguments that we have in the spiritual community. So we want to be really careful about what we're saying to ourselves and what we're saying to other people. And if someone is saying something to directly affect me and they're doing it intentionally, whether that's in a positive or negative direction, that is when I need to give feedback. But it's not a time for me to give feedback to people just because they believe something differently than I believe. Because when I then try to change their minds or tell them there is an agenda or an opposite story, it gives more confusion to that person, which takes their body out of any kind of peaceful state that they may be in. So even when people are believing things that are or are not the truth, because really, honestly, there is no truth. They are simply, everything to some degree is true and everything to some degree is not true. And the fact that this is a holographic reality where everything is a mere projection. So we're best off served at the end of this cycle, being peaceful within ourselves, being peaceful to other people, even if that means letting them believe exactly what they want to believe so that we can be in peace. Because if you've noticed, when you try to feed anybody any color of pill or give anybody a big download of cosmic information, when you take them out of peace, even if that's not your intention in doing so, you change the vibration of your body and you also take yourself out of peace. And the most important thing for us now is to keep ourselves in a state of peace and high frequency in every moment that we can, and be in the now. It's so hard with everything that's going on, not to think about how things went in the past for you or the planet, and not think about how things are going to go for you or the planet in the future, but really focus on nature and your surroundings. What makes your heart beat? What makes your heart sing? What brings joy and inspiration to every cell in your body? And that is why I spend so much time observing what's going on around me in nature. I want you, hopefully you guys are, I know I shouldn't say hopefully, having a beautiful holiday weekend. It is absolutely gorgeous here, and soon it will actually be cool enough to open the windows for the first time in many, many days. And luckily we're not having the humidity, but the heat has been pretty intense. And as a reminder for anyone that hasn't been following me for the last couple years, the reason we have this intense heat followed by these so we get these downloads and these codes and everything from this solar activation, which is coming from the sun, central sun, and great, great central sun, and on down the line of amazing galactic energies. When we get these things, there is always an incredible heat and the majority of the planet that comes along with them, which sometimes can seem absolutely unbearable. But what I have come to understand is that incredible heat that we receive along with this, even though it can sometimes be uncomfortable to our body, it's the heat is the fastest way for us to acclimate to the new plasmatic energy and the new plasmatic light. Also, I know when you click on the video, you don't see the screenshot that is the picture by the video title here. But that is a picture I took when I was meditating in bed about a week or two ago. There was just this block of rainbow, a complete, just a perfect square of a rainbow that appeared on my bedroom wall. And it was different than any rainbow I've ever seen. So the rainbow usually goes red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, but it went red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and then it went green, blue, violet, violet. So if you have a chance to look at that picture, that is what appeared on my bedroom wall, the picture that's on here. Much love to you guys, always. Be in peace, stay in peace, follow your heart. This is a time to not be in fear, because everything good, bad, and different is all a matter of perspective. And no matter what it is, whether it's within you or in your outside world, in this kind of solar frequency, remember the most important thing is that everything within you and everything within the outside world is receiving an incredible illumination that we have not seen in our lifetime. That's why we feel different. That's why we look different. And you guys may think this may sound a little bit nuts to you, but since I've been making videos for the last 4 years, this is something I've noticed a lot. And a lot of times I do videos without even putting makeup on. So it's easy for me to, and I don't use filters on videos either, take me as I am. But I've noticed that my face is actually different. And so if we're really paying attention, instead of just waiting for one particular giant event, our bodies are changing, our faces are changing, our flora and fauna is changing, everything is changing. Thank you for being here in this time of change. I love you. Bye.